Hi everybody, this is Mrs. Tevis-Finn. We are opening up with Settling the New World, and I want you to check out this map, which already shows that Spain and France had colonized the Americas. So my first line is, if it was a race, our 13 colonies were last place, meaning that our settlers were the last people to come, escaping religious persecution from Great Britain. So we're going to advance to the next slide, but we'll be doing this map in class to show where the 13 colonies were located. So my big question in this slide is what motivated early settlers to leave England? So there were three factors that pushed or led people to leave their home country and go to a new land. So the three factors are religious, economic, and political. Religious is the biggest, for the Protestant Reformation happened in Europe and led to many people being persecuted for their religion. Here is a picture of the Protestant Reformation, which just shows the crisis and conflict over the Church of England and the Catholic Church in Rome. And so if we go back, the religious factor of the Protestant Reformation is the first thing we'll talk about, meaning it was a huge cause of people coming to the Americas. The second is economic, and here I have a picture of the Enclosure Act in England. So if we go back to this side, the economic reason, the market for wool, if you look here, there are divisions in people's farms, and so this Enclosure Act led to many people losing their land, for they were not able to farm. And last is the political factor, which would be two countries competing for these new lands. So a rivalry is a competition, and England was competing with Spain. So let me show you that. So here is the Queen of England, and here is the King of Spain. So just a little background would be the Protestant Reformation led to the Church of England breaking away from the Catholic Church, which was in Italy, but also Spain was a strong Catholic country at this time. So let's go to the next slide. The earliest colonies were known as the Chesapeake colonies, and so Jamestown is famous for being the first experiment of people coming to America and trying to fend for themselves without any knowledge of farming or hunting. There was illness, and many, many died. There's a famous story of a captain. His name is John Smith, and who does he turn to for help but the people who originally lived in this land, the Native Americans. So Captain John Smith is pictured here. He bartered with the natives, meaning he can trade what he has, and the natives can help his people out. There was overcrowding with these settlers in this piece of land. So problems always come with overcrowding, meaning a lack of food and chaos. So settlers turned on their earlier allies. So when settlers attack natives, it's really the beginning of a long battle with white settlers versus Native Americans. You guys should know that tobacco was a huge money maker. So we're going to go through some of these vocabulary words in class, but the head rights system established a system where one person would come over and they would be able to get a certain amount of land. They were allowed to then get slaves to help grow their crops, and it led to increase in population in Jamestown. So with the natives noticing that their neighbors are growing stronger and more are increasing, their charter initially from England was revoked, and Virginia, as a moneymaker, became a royal colony. So the next in line in terms of the colonies that are established is Maryland. Lord Baltimore is the owner of this land. So a reason, remember what I said earlier, was religious. So Catholics were persecuted in England. Remember, the Church of England was no longer Catholic. So a proprietary colony was founded in the Americas, and it was a refuge for persecuted Catholics. So this kind of colony was similar to Virginia, but the ruler, Lord Baltimore, had unlimited power, kind of like a king. He could rule over the courts, he was in charge of the military, and oversaw the economy. So following English law was the most important thing to keep order in this new colony. The Pilgrims and Puritans we'll spend the most time on because they're right here in Massachusetts. So note the two different ones, the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the province of Massachusetts Bay. They were separatists, so they fled to America in 1620. They broke away from the Church of England, for they sought reform or change. The Plymouth Colony will be the first colony we look at, and William Bradford is their leader, pictured here on the ship. The Mayflower was their famous ship that came from England to the Americas, and they were able to ally with the Wampanoag tribe. Squanto is one Native American leader that helped with the establishment of the Plymouth Colony. So let's go to the next slide. The Massachusetts Bay Colony has a famous governor. His name is John Winthrop, and he led the Puritans. So you need to look at this quote. We'll go through it in class so that we all understand what he's talking about. But the main emphasis is right here. He really believed that he was doing God's work. So this religious motivation is important to take note. Heretics is a good vocabulary word we'll talk a lot about in class. So anybody who was against these Puritan beliefs were banished or sent away. Now, Rhode Island is a good example of this. For the minister from Massachusetts, his name was Roger Williams. He was an example of a heretic, right? So he wanted to further protest and change the way Puritans and the English king, who was giving away land to settlers that belonged to the Native Americans. So separatists who were even more radical than the Massachusetts Pilgrims and Puritans. So Roger Williams pictured here with the Native Americans. He actually purchases land from the Narragansett tribe. He was ordered to be deported back. So instead he escaped south and he founded Providence in Rhode Island, and their whole concept of religious freedom all comes from Roger Williams leaving Massachusetts because of more persecution. And also, seems like Rhode Island was trying to stand up for the Native Americans. Another example of the persecution and separatism is Anne Hutchinson. She was following in his footsteps, and she went to Portsmouth, Rhode Island, and also Newport and Warwick were also established as places for religious freedom. Here's Anne Hutchinson speaking and actually questioning the authority of male ministers. She became even unpopular in Rhode Island, so the courts charged her with heresy. Remember, a heretic would be somebody against their beliefs, and she was also banished or sent away. So a new colony, which is Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, was established. So Massachusetts seemed to be behind this, for they were charging more and more people as heretics, and then these people were moving south. Towns were combining to form a single colony based on religious freedom. So that's how we got Rhode Island, right? Because Massachusetts was so strict, people were banished, sent away. They went to this new land and formed the Rhode Island colony. Now, New England is a special phrase to refer to this area in Connecticut. Thomas Hooker was a reverend, so again, religious, and he founded Hartford in Connecticut. They had the first constitution, which is known as the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. So if you look at their license plates today, Connecticut, which should say the Constitution State. North of Massachusetts, many people don't know, but here is Maine, which was actually part of Massachusetts until 1820. Here we have New Hampshire. So Captain John Mason named the southern part New Hampshire, and the English court ruled against Massachusetts, and this new colony was founded. Sir Fernando Gorges, this territory was in North Massachusetts, and it was named Maine. New York and New Jersey were established by the Dutch East India Company. So Henry Hudson, pictured here, was an explorer. He came from New Amsterdam in Europe. England's Charles II, pictured here, was competing against another country in Europe known as the Netherlands. Now the Duke of York and the King's advisors both received land, New York and New Jersey, to settle. Pennsylvania is a completely unique colony, known as the Society of Friends. Their founder, pictured here, is George Fox. They were known as Quakers. Their nickname comes from how they used to pray and almost tremble. It also comes from paying a debt. King Charles II was paying back to William Penn, so he got this land in return. They believed in this concept of inner light, which was their faith in God, and they were pacifists, which means they were very against war. So they were very pro or in favor of peace. Philadelphia became known as the city of brotherly love, and they set up there, here is the early map of Philadelphia, their own colonial government. Delaware came as a response to growth in Pennsylvania. New lands always attracted immigrants, and so William Penn buys land from the Duke of York, and we have a new colony, Delaware. The Carolinas came from Charles II, remember, King of Spain. Carolina in Latin is Charles. So it was not divided into North and South until 1729. And we will definitely focus on South Carolina, for it was better suited for farming and for slave trade. Last but not least is Georgia. As an experiment for King George II, sent debtors, not criminals, and James Oglethorpe was their first leader. There were strict rules in place because these people did come from prison, and it was a royal colony from 1733 until the 1750s. So you need to know that Georgia has its origins as a place for criminals. They were mostly people, though, who couldn't pay their bills, so they were in debt or were poor. This is Mrs. Tevis-Finn signing off. This was your overview to the 13 colonies.